So welcome to our February Student Support Series, Building Healthy Relationships, Recognizing and Responding to Teen Dating Violence. Some housekeeping things. Most of you know, you've joined us before. My name is Kate Bohannon, and I'm a consultant for the State Department of Education. I want to start by saying thank you, CERC. We are finally on Zoom, and I'm so excited to have their support. And thank you all for sticking with me earlier this year when we had a few different technology issues with, the teams being a little temperamental. So as I said, cameras and microphones are disabled, so please use the chat for comments. And we're going to be using the Q&A feature for questions. That way they don't get lost in the shuffle. So again, if you have a comment, please put that in the chat. If you have a question that you'd like us to address, please put that in the Q&A function. The webinar is being recorded and the slides will be shared with all attendees. I will drop the link to the slides in the chat momentarily. And again, the recordings are available on our student support playlist. Please be mindful of identifying information and protecting confidentiality. We do have about 300 people registered today, so we've got a great audience here, but just again, be mindful of that confidentiality piece. And some information if you're having technical issues in the Zoom, you can send a chat to Craig Struble. And if you get kicked out, you can send an email to Linda Adorno at ctcirc.org. So this webinar has been approved for 1.5 continuing education credits by the NASW Connecticut, which meets approval for continuing education criteria for LCSW, LMSW, LMFT, LPC, and licensed psychologists. You can see the criteria there to be eligible for CECs. Please note that you need to fill out the CEC request form, which will be shared at the end by March 6th, just to ensure timely processing. Other disciplines are welcome to request CECs, but it is the responsibility of each individual to confirm whether or not your professional organization will accept those. And just double check, because sometimes a certificate of attendance is sufficient, and that will also be shared out that you can download and complete. Again, real quick, you've seen this before, but I think it's always just great to ground us in who we are and who we're doing this for. So some information about our demographics of our students, our school districts, and our mental health staff here in Connecticut. This is all available on EdSite. And without further ado, our lovely presenters this morning. So if you joined us last month, you will remember Allison Karimi. Allison has over 25 years of experience with the Connecticut Department of Children and Families, and she specializes in child protective services and behavioral health. She's held diverse roles, including education consultant, social worker, intake worker, foster care social worker, TDM facilitator, and intimate partner violence consultant. As one of the first IPV consultants hired by DCF Region 4 in 2013, Allison played a pivotal role in supporting families affected by IPV and advancing the department's initiatives to strengthen services and support for those experiencing IPV. In 2022, she was promoted to program supervisor in the behavioral health division, where she oversees multiple DCF contracted services, including all IPV service contracts. Allison has played a key role in co-facilitating numerous IPV trainings for internal DCF staff and community providers, while fostering strong partnerships with organizations to improve services for families affected by IPV. And we are so happy and fortunate to have her back for another student support series with us this month. Joining Allison today is Dr. Susie DiVietro. Susie is a medical anthropologist and research scientist at the Injury Prevention Center at Connecticut Children's and Hartford Hospital. She serves as an assistant professor of pediatrics at the University of Connecticut School of Medicine and teaches anthropology at Trinity College. Her work applies anthropological research methods to the study of violence, particularly family and dating violence, child maltreatment, trauma, and community and healthcare-based interventions. Dr. DiVietro is committed to applied research, community education, intervention development, and collaborates extensively with the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence and the Connecticut Department of Children and Families. So thank you both so much for joining us and sharing your time and expertise. I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to you all. And I will now put the link to the slides in the chat for everybody too.
Thanks, Kate. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to turn things over. I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to let Allison kick things off. Right. Okay.
So good morning, everyone. As Kate shared, I'm Allison Karimi, and both Susie and I are very, very excited to be here. So we'll start with going over our agenda. Um, our first objective is to explain the dynamics, warning signs, and impacts of teen dating violence. Our second objective is to identify trauma-informed strategies to support students who are in violent relationships. And our third objective is to provide resources for staff and student education around teen dating violence prevention. So on March 27, 2003, 15-year-old Ortala Mosley broke up with her 16-year-old boyfriend, Marcus McTeer, both sophomores at Reagan High School in Austin, Texas. The next day, Mosley told teachers that McTeer was becoming increasingly violent with her and that she was worried about her safety. 2 hours later, McTeer found Mosley in the hallway and killed her with a butcher knife. So, as hard as it is to read this and hear this, dating violence happens at schools. Teen dating violence, it profoundly impacts like overall health, opportunities, and well-being for youngsters. And believe it or not, the effects will last a lifetime. And data has shown children as young as 11 have been entering into and experiencing dating violence. Definitions and terminology. You'll hear teen dating violence, you'll hear adolescent relationship aggression, intimate partner violence, physical, sexual, psychological, or emotional aggression, all within a dating relationship. In talking about prevalence of teen dating violence, according to the CDC's Youth Risk Behavior Survey that was completed in 2021, about 1 in 10 experienced sexual dating violence, about 1 in 12 experienced physical dating violence. Our Connecticut School Health Survey that was completed in 2023, our statistics show 14.7% had experienced sexual dating violence and 8.7% had experienced physical dating violence. One in three young people have experienced physical, emotional, sexual, or verbal abuse in their relationship. So, in talking about teen dating violence, why focus on young people? 1.5 million high school students experience dating abuse every year. 40% say abuse happens on school grounds. 70% who experience teen dating violence viewed their relationship as healthy when they were in them. Only 33% of teens that have been experiencing teen dating violence ask for help. So, again, being able to reinforce what healthy relationships are, warning signs, being able to identify supports and resources, right? Key areas. And that's why we want to focus on young people. Why teens don't ask for help, right? They may not recognize dating abuse. They may recognize abuse, but fear social consequences of seeking that help. They can doubt adults can provide any help to them. They may feel that, there's going to be victim blaming, there's minimization, inaction to, what they're sharing. Less than half of teens are aware of domestic violence laws or Title IX protections. And so before we get into like the types of abuse, Susie, can you go back for a quick? I think it's important to again preface, that half of teens that have been surveyed or talked to just are not aware of any type of resources. That's, really astounding. Like, so I just wanted to preface that. Go ahead, Susie. Thank you. Types of abuse. When we're looking at teen dating violence, the types of abuse, very much go hand in hand with that of, adults experiencing IPV. So there's physical violence, there's sexual violence, psychological violence, stalking. There could be reproductive coercion, substance use coercion, economic, financial abuse, technology abuse. So when we're talking about, types of violence, um, being forced by someone that they're dating or going out with to do, sexual things. Those things could be like kissing, touching, being physically forced to have sexual intercourse that they did not want to. Um, so all of those things kind of fall into those categories. And in surveys that have been done, those things that I just kind of went over, being forced by someone that they were dating to do sexual things or being physically forced to have sexual intercourse. Um, a survey had been completed. Um, if these things had been done to a youth 12 months before the survey, and 8.2% of boys had said yes, and 20.3% of girls had said yes. When it came to surveying around being physically hurt on purpose by someone they were dating or going out with, um, identifying things such as being hit, slammed into something, injured with an object or weapon, and that these things had occurred within 12 months before this survey was being done. We had, again, 8.6% of boys and 8.7% of girls. So just important to share that. There's about 1.5 million high school students experiencing dating violence and abuse per year. Risk factors, older age group, um, sex, gender identity, history of traumatic events, recent stressful life events, substance use, mental health challenges. More than, again, more than half teens um, who were surveyed or who are talked to, again, are unaware of any type of dating violence, domestic violence laws. They're not aware of like school policies that offer protection from like retaliation. Um, Many of these youngsters, they doubt, that they can trust somebody or that there's an adult that they can share this information and get meaningful help from. Um, when we're looking at the ages of teen dating violence, it's really occurring between like 11 and 24. Um, Go ahead, Susie. Team power and control. So when we're looking at like power and control, there's peer pressure, threats to expose, spread rumors, tell lies to peer groups. There's the anger and emotional abuse, put downs, name calling, mind games, guilt, using social status, making all the decisions, really defining roles. There's intimidation. It could be destroying things, harming pets, threatening pets, making the individual afraid at all times. Minimizing, denying, blaming, shifting responsibility, making light of the abuse, threats to leave, to hurt their self or partner. That's a huge one. You'll hear often, teens will report, well, they said they love me so much, they can't live without me. If I was to ever leave them, they would kill themselves. They don't want to live anymore. These are things that teens will report out as some of the reasons why they're staying. Um, Sexual coercion, manipulation for sex, date rape, using different types of illicit drugs, isolation and exclusion, controlling who they see, who they talk to, where they go, what they read, limiting outside involvement. You'll see individuals just showing up um, to events that their dating partner may be at, whether they are, spending time with friends, and then all of a sudden, the partner shows up and says, "Oh, I just missed you so much, and I just want to spend time with you," or, "Hey, let's go spend time together. I'll come get you now." Or when they're spending time with friends, constant text messaging, like, "Where are you? What are you doing? I miss you so much. Like, call me." Um, just, again, continuing to threat and really manipulate.
All right, thanks, Allison. I'm going to pick it up from here for a bit. First, before I start, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to some of the folks from Interval House, which is the domestic violence agency in Hartford. When we were first asked to give this presentation, I've given many teen dating violence presentations, but it's been a few years. And so I just wanted to touch base to make sure that what I had was still in line with what's being taught. And Maggie Taylor, Jessica Garcia, and Alexis Tosada sat down with me and went through the whole presentation and gave so much amazing feedback, even introduced me to a few terms that I had not heard before. So I just wanted to give them a quick shout out for their help, which really is an important point because these are teenagers, and the stuff that they're experiencing could be really quite different from what we're experiencing with adults. And so it's important that we're constantly checking back in with the teens themselves and that we're constantly learning from our students. I want to start by highlighting economic abuse. So the definition of economic abuse is a deliberate pattern of control in which individuals interfere with their partner's ability to acquire, use, and maintain economic resources. And what's really interesting about economic abuse is that it's often sort of left off of those lists of types of abuse. And there's been some studies of the general public that most people don't consider economic abuse part of abuse. There was actually a study a few years ago, 78% of Americans didn't recognize financial or economic abuse as a form of domestic violence. But when you talk to people that are actually in these relationships, that are in them for many years, they'll tell you that this is the number one reason why they can't get out of the relationships is because of sort of the years of economic abuse. And if you think about it for teens, they're just starting out with like towards these ideas of independence and adulthood. They might have their first new job, their first relationship. They're starting to make decisions without consulting their parents. And so this time of new responsibilities and new experiences can be extremely challenging as they're trying to sort of balance that newfound independence with these new relationships. So it's really important that we let teenagers know about economic abuse and what a huge impact it can have on their lives. Especially since if you think about, and I'll go through this, I really love this diagram. We're going to talk about sabotage, so what that looks like, control and exploitation, and we'll kind of go through those things. But it can be really hard for a teenager to really understand that something like their partner wanting them to not study so they can spend more time with them doesn't necessarily seem objectively harmful, but it's really about the cumulative impact of these seemingly harmful actions that can have a really profound impact on their future well-being and their future potential for success. So economic abuse within the teen relationship, within teen dating violence, can disrupt education, can disrupt employment, and can disrupt financial stability that has kind of reverberates throughout the rest of their lives and the rest of their relationships too. So I wanted to really highlight this. So there's some really great new studies and literature that's coming out specifically looking at how this impacts teens. And I'll just say one other thing. I have a tendency to talk really fast. So if I'm going too fast, you can put it in the chat and tell me to slow down. But once I get going, I get faster and faster. So I will not be offended if you tell me that I need to slow down. I'm just going to take a breath. All right. So starting with sabotage. So academic career and employment sabotage. So what does this look like for teenagers? Interfering with their ability to study, saying you don't need to study for that test. Let's just hang out. Like, don't you love me? Don't you want to spend? Aren't I more important to you than school? I'm controlling their schedule, so asking for them to change their schedule so that they can spend more time with the partner, pressuring or coercing them to skip class or even drop out of school entirely, or coercing them to change their plans. So maybe they had dreams of, going to medical school or, or going to college or doing these other things. And now because of this new partner, all of those dreams are sort of given up on or they just don't even follow through with them. Or interfering and causing trouble at work, preventing them from having a job. And we see these things in adult relationships too. But again, most people do not consider this to be domestic violence. So that's why it's especially important for within schools and with adolescents and teens that we really get the message across that this is abusive, that this is coercive, and that this can have really lifelong impacts. Futures Without Violence did a study a couple of years ago in 2021. They had about 3,000 youth, and of those survey respondents, 68% said a partner had interfered with schoolwork. So this is something that's happening a lot in those relationships. So we really have to highlight it as part of this, as something that is potentially violent or abusive. So that's sabotage. So moving into financial control. So requiring permission to spend money, criticizing them for how they're spending money, coercing them to buy items. So this is even if the teenager has their own job, they're still not able to really control the financial aspect of their relationship. And this is where Interval House told me to really include love bombing and the Romeo pimp. I had never heard of the Romeo pimp previously. Love bombing, I'm accustomed to, which is where sort of romance becomes manipulation, sort of overwhelming someone with excessive action and attention in order to manipulate and control them. This can really happen in the context of financial abuse. So you can really love bomb someone with like lots of presents and with lots of economic resources. The Romeo pimp, which I just recently learned, is someone who lures vulnerable individuals into commercial sex by luring them into a romantic relationship. So really, it starts off as what seems like a normal, loving relationship. This often happens through targeting victims on social media, and then they form a relationship both on and offline, and then that turns into a form of trafficking. So the Romeo pimp is someone who sort of engages in this love bombing, showers their partner with love and affection, and promises not just of a relationship, but of certain material rewards too. So like you're going to be part of this, have all the access to all these resources. And then that turns into someone being trafficked. And I know this is not a trafficking presentation, but I just wanted to put it out there that trafficking has really exploded online, that all studies have shown that trafficking is really occurring more and more on Facebook, on Instagram. And it's really recruitment through the idea of a relationship. So it's not just that kids are signing up to be part of a trafficking site, they're signing up to be in a relationship, and this relationship is being used to then bring them into the world of trafficking. So love being really used as a weapon. And then exploitation of resources. So this is using the partner's money to pay for things for themselves. So the abusive partner sort of controlling all those resources, using a partner for access to transportation, shelter, food, and demanding that a partner share usernames or passwords to access their money, really. And one of the other things that Interval House point out in their discussion with teens is that often the sharing of passwords is just sort of an expectation now, that this is just something that everyone does. It's not questioned. That if you're in a relationship, this is just sort of an indicator that you're in the relationship, which is fascinating, right? If you think about that level of control. We also know that fights about money issues in youth dating relationships is associated with future physical perpetration of violence. So it doesn't just stop with the exploitation of resources, it becomes other types of exploitation. And in that same study from 2021, 65% of teens said that a partner took control of their finances. Another thing to note here is that intimate partner violence is the leading cause of homelessness. Victims of violence are 4 times more likely to end up homeless. And these are patterns of dependency and exploitation and control that can start out in these young relationships. So it used to be way back when we sort of thought, well, they're just kids, we don't really have to pay attention to those relationships, we'll worry about it when they're adults or when they're older. That is just not the case. This is when they're really learning about relationships, learning what it feels like to be in those relationships. And sometimes these relationships can last a lifetime. So we'll talk to adults, and these were their teen relationships that they're still in and that they're still struggling with and that are horrifically violent and abusive. So we really do need to pay attention to this economic aspect of the relationships. And I'm going to switch over and talk about technology for a bit. There's lots of different ways to talk about abuse in technology. These are just some of the terms. So cyber dating abuse, digital, electronic, technology facilitated, online dating violence, socially interactive technology dating abuse. There is no shortage of terms for using technology to harm your partner. But really what we're talking about here is any abusive behaviors that happen via social networks, instant messaging, emails, calls, texts, photos, videos. Anytime that you're using technology to manipulate, harm, surveil, control your partner, that's within this domain of abuse and technology. What we know is that advancements in technology is constantly changing. It's also really redefining social relationships for teenagers and for young people. People often use technology to keep in touch with their friends, but also with their dating partners. It used to be, so way back when I first started training on this, which was many years ago, it was the case that if you wanted to use technology to harass or harm your partner, you had to be sort of good at tech. You had to be in IT, you had to sort of know things about computers. That is absolutely not the case anymore. Anyone can use technology to harm their partners. Now, you don't have to be good at technology, you don't have to work in IT. There's so many different ways that you can use tech to manipulate and harm your partner. So it's really important that we sort of get out in front of it and try to understand what this looks like for teenagers. So, to mention the Connecticut Youth Risk Behavior Survey. So the last year that we have good data from is 2023. And in Connecticut, 17% of high school students were electronically bullied in the last year. And this was, quote, being bullied through texting, Instagram, Facebook, or other social media ever during the 12 months before the survey. 1 in 3 teens nationally report experiencing cyber dating abuse. 1 in 4 says that they perpetrate cyber dating abuse. And 1/4 of teens in relationships in the past year had been victims of digital dating abuse. And what we know is that it doesn't often stay in the digital world. It goes from digital into real life. And it's strongly associated with other types of violence, sexual assault, and bullying. Kate, I see you're visible. Did you have a question?
Yes, I put a resource in the chat when you're talking about the use of technology and photos and videos and things like that online. So I put something in the chat. It's from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It's their Take It Down campaign. I know from experience working in a high school that reaching out to the contact us on social media doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
But NCMEC has this network, and they can help get these photos and images off of the internet. So I did put that resource in there for you all. And there's some just frequently asked questions, because I know there's sometimes questions about what is considered child pornography versus just, an inappropriate photo. And that line gets kind of blurry. And I think kids downplay that. Students and adolescents sometimes downplay having those videos and photos out there, but once they're out there, they're out there. So this is just a resource I wanted to share with you all.
Thank you so much, Kate. And we'll talk through that. I'm not familiar with that one, but that sounds great. We'll talk through a few other resources because again, this is something that is in terms of what's having the real impact on teens. This is it, right? This is the entree into other forms of violence. It's much more prevalent than other forms of violence. And it also, so new technology and instant messaging really allows dating abuse to continue through screens. So teenagers are thus more accessible, they're constantly accessible, and thus more vulnerable too for this type of abuse. And we can kind of think about it as occurring in sort of 2 different buckets. So there's control. So that's surveillance, invasion of privacy, using trackers or insisting on having them know your location. So your locations are always turned on. Controlling social media updates. We heard from the folks at Interval House that they're now making it so that the partner gets their Instagram notifications. So the partner knows every time something is popping up on their own Insta screen. Checking their partner's contacts, demanding passwords, which is now, I've learned, is really just an expectation for many of these relationships. And then direct aggression. So direct aggression is sort of really more about with the intent to cause harm, less about manipulation, but it's really insulting, humiliating, threatening, ridiculing, using technology to do these things. And unlike traditional technology or traditional teen dating violence that occurs face to face, this again, it can happen anywhere, it can happen at any time, and it also can cause public humiliation. So that damage can be, as Kate mentioned, like once those videos are out there, that damage continues. So it can be even more damaging and harmful to teenagers. So what does this look like? Constant calling and texting, sending threats, excessive FaceTime, making jealous or negative comments on social media, pressuring them to change or to really have complete control over what that profile looks like for the partner, controlling who they can and can't connect with online, which can be really important. So many teens, that is their whole community, is the community that they interact with online. So controlling that can have really outsized impacts, forcing them to share passwords, threatening to share fake or private pictures. And the reality now is that the deep fakes are so good that they don't even have to have an original photo of that person. They can create a photo very, very easily. I'm going to talk about endtab.org. That is a great resource. Forcing them to participate in humiliating online activities. And then I'll talk for a minute about AI chatbots. What's really interesting about FaceTime is that with FaceTime, you can really have an abuser in the room, basically in the room with you at all times. So they're seeing who you're with, who's there, they're seeing your whole setting. And they can also do screen sharing on your phone so that they can actually see everything that you're seeing on your phone. And it makes it so that the person is available to them 24 hours a day. And this can really segue into other types of stalking. And once you start FaceTiming all day long, it can be really difficult to then put up any boundaries on that. And this can be really hard for school environments. Often parents have no idea that it's a problem, that they're being stalked, and they're being harmed in the school spaces. And it's important to keep in mind that technology is not a replacement for trust. Often teens are expecting them to sort of prove things using their phones, but we shouldn't constantly have to prove it. That trust is a cornerstone of a healthy relationship. And also that, parents might have the right to your locations, but your partner does not have a right to know your location at all time. And then I just want to talk briefly about AI chatbots. So endtab.org is a great resource for all things related to technology abuse. They have a great newsletter, and the most recent newsletter that they put out a few about this, is about AI chatbots. And they have some new literature. 72% of teens have used AI chatbots. I'm going to say that again. 72% have used AI chatbots. 52% are regular users. 31% said that their conversations with AI are more satisfying than conversations with humans. And this means that they're actually meeting real emotional needs for teens, things like needing to feel heard, feel supported, or simply not feeling alone. Teens describe these bots as non-judgmental friends who are always there. Others confide in them in moments of pain or boredom or anxiety. And these are not fringe behaviors. They reflect a growing reliance on AI for emotional regulation without the human safety net of things like accountability, empathy, or care. And there's a deeper risk. So we know that AI companions are sort of quietly reshaping the ways that young people relate to themselves and relate to others. And when you match a young person with a still developing brain with a powerful, addictive, and manipulative technology that is largely unregulated, bad things can really happen. The problem isn't that teens are finding comfort in these interactions. The problem is that they're teaching and normalizing unhealthy and unrealistic behaviors, particularly in relationships. So with these chatbots that take on sort of the form of a boyfriend or a girlfriend, they become accustomed to behaviors like excessive affection, like these love bombing. What we would call love bombing from a person is sort of the norm with these chatbots. It's like constant and really magnified adoration of the partner. It's also meeting that person's needs without any kind of reciprocity. So the person doesn't have to reciprocate anything. So they're learning that they can be showered with affection and love and not have to give anything back, not reciprocate in any way. Also, the constant availability and constant responsiveness. So chatbots are always there. They're always available. There's no boundaries to when you can talk and when they'll answer you back. So there's an expectation of that constant availability. And also that encourages deep personal disclosure, premature. So instead of sort of gradually disclosing these feelings and gradually building the relationship, that's all done right at the beginning. So they're really encouraging really damaging and destructive types of relationships that don't correspond to real relationships where you have another person that is going to hopefully get some reciprocity, and some limits on that availability. And so we really need to understand that teens are often not communicating in the same way, but it's really important that we don't demonize technology. This is how teens are connecting, how they're getting in touch with their friends, how they're finding support, emotional and other types of support. So it's important that we don't try to demonize it, that we don't try to take it away from teens, but we try to encourage them to set boundaries and to understand what is an appropriate and non-appropriate use of technology. I just want to talk briefly about equity. We know that anyone can experience teen dating violence, but victimization does correspond with oppression. So teens with disabilities are twice as likely to experience violence in their relationship. 60% of Black girls will experience sexual assault before age 18. Lesbian and bisexual women are more likely to be raped, physically assaulted, or stalked by an intimate partner, compared to 35% of heterosexual women. And trans and gender nonconforming teens have very, very high rates of coercive control and physical harm. So when abuse disproportionately affects teens on the basis of race, gender, ability, or sexual orientation, it really creates a barrier to full and equal access to education. And so bridging this achievement gap demands a school-based response to domestic violence or teen dating violence that supports students that are experiencing abuse and then works to really prevent future violence. So I'm going to turn things over to Allison.
Thank you, Susie. So short and long-term effects of teen dating violence. High school students who've been physically hurt by a partner They can earn grades of C or D twice as often as grades of A's or B's, 25% more likely to drop out of school, um, experience a 20% reduction in earning over their lifetime, are more likely to smoke, use drugs, become pregnant as a teen, develop eating disorders, and consider or attempt suicide or other self-harming behaviors. In talking about short and long-term effects of teen dating violence, we see physical health consequences such as injuries, headaches, stomach problems, mental health consequences, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, eating disorders, substance misuse, suicidality, academics and social problems, increased risk for future intimate partner violence, and long-term emotional scars. So, like teens who are experiencing dating violence often struggle in school. They can have trouble focusing, missing class, um, sometimes drop out of school. It can make it really hard for them to connect with like friends, families. They tend to start feeling isolated. Beyond the personal impact, dating violence affects everyone. It strains healthcare, law enforcement, community resources. The cost in the United States, it's costing billions of dollars um, to address and provide care for individuals experiencing teen dating violence, intimate partner violence. Um, Again, there's issues around trust, ongoing issues that go throughout life with fear of entering into new relationships. Um, these youngsters go on having low self-esteem. Um, and again, the effects of an unhealthy relationship in these younger formative years can last a lifetime. So go to the next slide. Why an adolescent may not disclose to an adult. They may fail to recognize that what they're experiencing is even dating abuse or violence. Again, they don't have an adult that they can trust. And it may not be that there isn't an adult they can trust, it's that they just don't think they can, and don't have they don't know how to come forward to share what they're experiencing. Um, a lot of them think that they can stop the abuse themselves. There's a huge fear of their parents finding out, fear around the partner retaliating, fear that no one will believe them, fear that they will be outed, fear that they'll be embarrassed, especially if the recipient of violence identifies as a boy. So there's a lot that goes into these adolescents, making decisions to just, keep this very private and personal. Um, Again, I think some of the biggest pieces are just being even judged by their peer group. Um, Pressures around, you'll see a lot if they're dating someone who's deemed as a popular person in the school. There's a lot of fear around that, and retaliation by peers and other, friends in the community. Teen dating violence and you, it can be very difficult to get out of these relationships. School support personnel have a responsibility to address the issue. Schools can either contribute to the problem or they can help solve it. Assessing, intervening, and preventing teen dating violence, it really falls on all of us. It's all of our, collectively as a community, it's all of our responsibility to see like how can we assess, how can we intervene, and how can we prevent, right, with ongoing education and support. Just going back to one of the things that, Susie was touching on with technology, it's almost like, it's normalized in these unhealthy teen relationships. It's normalized that trust is not having privacy, and that being in a young dating relationship, trust to a lot of these youngsters revolves around giving access to everything. right? And so, again, one of the huge ways we can help is by reinforcing, right, what a healthy relationship is, what are healthy boundaries, the importance of privacy.
We just had a question in the chat, and I know that I feel this question because I've had been in similar situations. Um,
Mhm.
it says, can you speak about whether it's helpful for school personnel to tell teens they must end a relationship, or will that sort of, will they feel like they need to rebel against that situation? Do you have any advice or thoughts around that question?
Susie, you
Yeah,
want
that's a great question. I think that
to?
generally, we would not tell you to tell
Mhm.
your student that they must end a relationship. This definitely creates a, us versus the world dynamic,
Mhm.
and they'll then start to defend the person. We'll kind of go through some tips for
Yeah.
how to respond to a disclosure, but saying, and we say this even for adults too, saying, oh, you need to leave him. We know that leaving is the most dangerous time,
Mhm.
ending a relationship is the most dangerous time. So if they're in a violent relationship and they actually told you about it, we want to sort of like build on that trust and hopefully like get them start talking to them about the resources that they have. But if you immediately say, "Oh, you need to break up right now," it's not a great method, right? Even
Yeah.
if that's the first thing that we want them to do, and it can be really frustrating. It's we wouldn't necessarily recommend it,
Yeah.
even if it's what you want to say the first thing. And we understand that desire, but it could again set up that dynamic where it's us against the world. Nobody understands me. Nobody understands our relationship. Yeah, Allison, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's, again, if we come off the same way with an, adult IPV relationship, we have to come off in a non-judgmental way, right? It's not our role to tell somebody like who they should love or be with. It's really our role as a community to share what is a healthy relationship and how should partners treat each other in those relationships. And identifying, if things are unhealthy and unsafe, right? Um, how do you get there? So those are the biggest piece because the more we say this person is not a good person and this, the more they're going to pull away from the support to help them. So we've kind of always, I think, Susie, we take the stance of like, we're not here to tell you who you should love and care for, but we are here to share, how you should be treated and how you should treat others. And there's an activity that's often done where you can say, what are all the qualities that attracted you to your dating partner? And what do you look for in a dating partner? And they'll start to outline, those things, a funny person, caring, whether there's a physical attraction, they're kind, loving, treat me with respect. And then you go into, let's talk about your current partner. And they actually will see if you chart it out, like they start crossing out, well, no, my partner doesn't do this. No, my partner doesn't do that. So again, it's providing that education and keep coming back to them, not walking away, not judging. Yeah, so
Yeah, that's a great point. And also just to the extent that you can kind of talk to them about what it means to be in a healthy relationship and have them see for themselves that this relationship not be
mhm,
good for them, it's much more meaningful and
mhm.
potentially like something that can cause change as opposed to you just saying, no, no, you need to break up with that person. Um,
Yeah. So with teen dating violence, and it can be very difficult, thank you, levels of service to address teen dating violence in schools, assessment, right? Tools, skills, information to determine whether students are involved in an abusive relationship or not. Interventions, again, information, skills, supports to help students end abusive relationships, how to develop healthy ones, prevention, right? Policies, norms, resources in schools that support healthy relationships, right? And I think you'll continue to see developing healthy relationships and how to support them. And that starts at a really young age, right? So when we're thinking about teen dating violence, we really have to just focus on healthy relationships. And that starts at a very young age when children are building, friendships and relationships, peer relationships. And how are they building those relationships? How are they engaging in those relationships with building, trust and respect, and feeling secure in those friendships? And how are things being addressed if as children, they're not treating each other nicely, right? And it's building at that very young age, building all of those things into these children, so that if they happen to start dating someone, um, they can identify those red flags right away. Special role of educators in addressing teen dating violence, right? So educators are in a unique position to influence, motivate, and lead children and youth. Educators are in it every day. Spend so much time even with these youngsters, and really, really have a lot of influence um, on these kids. Um, Educators help students understand. They can help students understand healthy relationships. They can help students with recognizing signs of unhealthy and abusive relationships. There's leverage. You can leverage classroom discussions. There can be special projects that model, appropriate behaviors. And just the importance of at least one trusted adult, right, in each student's life, in that school environment alone. So, when we're talking, I think it's important too, like when we're talking about just identifying the special, roles, it's that mentoring and role modeling. And I'll continue to say it. It was at the end of the last slide. If each child in a school system um, can feel that they have that one trusted adult, it will really go a very, very long way. So that brings me to like, why are you needed, right? Um, you communicate well with and respect students. You have knowledge of students' issues. You're aware of cultural biases. You recognize when students are in trouble. You know what to do in emergencies. You can work with the entire school community. You have the information and skills to help students work through conflicts. And most of these kids in school, they look up to all of you. Again, you're mentoring and role modeling. You're spending so much time with these kiddos.
Hi, thanks, Allison. So I'm going to start back up with some signs. So if you're not sure if your student, what's some things to look out for? So attendance problems, particularly if they're new. So if this is a student who came to class regularly, never had an issue with attendance, and now you don't see them anymore. Lack of interest in activities. So maybe they were involved in extracurriculars or run a sports team, and now you see that all kind of falling off. A sudden request for a change in schedule, unexpected changes in behavior, grades, schoolwork, or even changes in their physical appearance, their demeanor, isolation from former friends. So maybe they were part of a really, tight-knit friend group, and now they're just not associating with those friends anymore, where they're really not seeing anyone but their dating partner. Also making excuses for inappropriate behavior, and then any kind of new disciplinary problems like bullying or acting out. Usually, you're not always going to see like lots of really dramatic signs. Sometimes you might, but it's really important that you trust your instincts and look out for red flags. Um, when you see, for instance, when you see public displays of affection, is this something do they both seem enthusiastic about? So physical affection can often be used as a way to sort of control or manipulate a partner. So is this something that they're both entering into enthusiastically? Are you not seeing them at the extracurriculars that you used to see them, or not seeing them with their friend group anymore? We know that teens that are experiencing dating violence also experience greater social isolation. Again, this is a tactic that abusive partners often use to isolate against all of their other resources and all their other supports. But it's important to keep in mind that not every teenager in trouble will show you the same kinds of warning signs. So it's important that you sort of trust your instincts. So if you find yourself worried about a particular student, there's probably a good reason to be worried. Um, So in terms of assessing risks, sort of looking out for your students, has this student been humiliated? Often this humiliation can be quite public, so maybe we've even heard about the humiliation happening. Do they seem more isolated? Are they not talking to people in the same way that they used to? Have they been harmed physically or sexually? Have they been harmed over the internet? Again, being harmed over the internet can in some ways be even more painful because it's those harms can really reverberate, and those things that are online, they don't go away. Have they been insulted or manipulated? Are they constantly questioned about their other activities or relationships by their partner? So it's important to keep in mind each student is different, each situation is different, each relationship between student and school personnel is different. And often students really don't know what constitutes a healthy relationship. So this is something that if we don't talk to them about it, if we're not teaching them, they have no way of knowing. And this is especially true for those who have violent relationships in the home. So what they're seeing at home is a violent relationship. That's something that they're much more likely to replicate in their children's lives, and as a teen as well. So how to help your students? Be clear. Tell your students that abuse is unacceptable and that you take it seriously. Talk about it in class, right? So set the norm that this is something that this is within your domain of school, that this is something that we need to be talking about. Encourage those discussions. Ask them what they think about abuse. Ask them what they think about teen dating violence. Encourage them to think about what happens when you're a victim of violence, what happens when you're a perpetrator of violence, both in their own relationships and society at large. So if you have those sort of high profile abuse cases that are in the media that people are talking about, talk about it in class, right? Take it as a topic for you to really dig into with your students, because likely they're probably talking about it with their peers. So the fact that you can have this dialogue and provide some guidance about what is healthy, what is unhealthy, what is violent, that is a real opportunity for you. And listen, this is the biggest one. When you talk to teens about what they want is someone to listen and without judgment. So a non-judgmental listener. Listen to what they tell you, and listen to what you see, what you hear. Let them know that you care and you're there for them and that you're paying attention to them. Yeah, the main thing that they ask for is they want someone who will listen without judging them. Also, be prepared. Be aware of your mandated reporting requirements. Luckily, we have Allison here from DCF, so she can, if we have any questions specific to mandated reporting, it's important that you know about it, right? If you work in the school system, you are mandated reporters. So knowing how that applies to you, and to your counselor and to the discussions that you have is really important. And also spread the word. So don't try to go about this all on your own. So if you're the only person within your school that's at this training today, talk to the other people at your school. Talk to the other people that you can engage in this work. Talk to your administrators. You don't have to take this all on your own, right? This is hard and heavy work. I mean, the reality is that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 7 men have been in abusive relationships. And I think that count on men is actually low. I think it's more than that. So the reality is that most of us have had these experiences and we carry them with us. So we need to really be upfront about that, about how hard these conversations can be, and enlist the support of the other people that work at your school and that are in your community, right? You don't have to go about this all on your own. This is hard work that you shouldn't have to take on just yourself. I just want to highlight again, I know I started off talking about economic to start the conversation about economic abuse in your own classes. We know that healthy relationship and financial literacy programming really helps teens to recognize and protect themselves from the control, exploitation, and sabotage that we talked about earlier. And so there's some great resources out there for how to start this conversation. So first, you can start off by describing what economic abuse looks like, especially for young people. And again, this is something that adults aren't even really talking about. So we really need to start this conversation early and continue to have it. So what does economic abuse look like for teenagers? How things like asking your partner to not study for that test or asking them to change their schedule, how those things seem innocuous, but over time, the cumulative impacts can make it so that it can be very devastating to their own academic success, their own economic success in the future. Developing strategies for things like navigating conflict in relationships. And this isn't just going to help them in their romantic relationships. Navigating conflict is something that is useful for all relationships. So things like how to establish boundaries. What does it mean to exercise a healthy boundary? And to do that really hard thing where it's balancing your own personal aspirations with the relationship. So how do you have a balance between your long-term goals, the things that you want to do with your life, what you want to be when you grow up, and the relationship? So how do you manage that? And then, of course, modeling in your own behaviors in the classroom. How do you model that? How do you create a trusting and empowered classroom? So how do you model healthy compromise? So thinking about what it means to be in a healthy relationship and how that comes with things like compromise and understanding, and equity. And what does it mean to be in an equitable relationship and sort of having those conversations. Um, and then I also we're going to talk through some of these resources at the end, but I really wanted to highlight loveisrespect.org. The Healthy Educators Toolkit. Loveisrespect.org has a ton of resources. I'm just going to highlight a few, but I strongly encourage you to go on their website. They have so much available. It's all free. It's all really informed by their youth led. So this is all like right from teens themselves really drive this work. But some of the things that I think are particularly helpful in the classroom environment, topics to tackle, communicating effectively, right? Again, this isn't just going to help them in their romantic relationships. The ability to communicate effectively will help them in all of their relationships that they have. So how to properly communicate with others to build and sustain healthy relationships. So things like talk. So is it okay to try to resolve a conflict via texting? Why or why not, right? How to have those conversations. Is not talking at all better than having a conflict? Why or not? Why not? How to communicate when you're angry? Building up those kinds of communication skills, those are lifelong. Like those are skills that we really need adults to have more of, right? So if we can start these conversations early about how to be an effective communicator, that can really reverberate and have a huge impact on the rest of their lives. Things like resolving conflicts, techniques to avoid and manage conflicts with dating partners. So you can guide students through addressing conflict resolution. So what does conflict resolution look like in a healthy versus an unhealthy relationship, right? So in a healthy relationship, it could look like setting boundaries and compromise. Like that's what you do in a healthy relationship. In an unhealthy relationship, it's personal attacks. It's not being able to express yourself without fear of retaliation. So being able to understand the difference between a healthy and unhealthy way of resolving conflicts. Again, these are lifelong skills, being able to resolve conflicts in a positive way. And then stepping in. So learning how to cultivate healthy relationships and how to recognize and intervene in unhealthy ones. So guiding students to understand what is a healthy versus unhealthy, how to effectively communicate their needs, and then how they can help themselves and their friends to stay healthy and safe. So how to intervene when you see something happening in your own friend group, because the reality is that teens will often disclose to other teens. So we need to empower other teens to know what to say and know what to do when their friends are disclosing to them as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Allison for how to respond to
Yeah.
disclosure.
Thank you, Susie. And, I just want to emphasize before moving into how to respond to disclosure that, educators and all of you that work in school systems are probably the most qualified people, right, to help students, right? You're you're ethical, you have professional training, you have the support of your organizations, and you're very familiar with the school community and the students, right? And so schools develop different protocols, ways to start just embedding these conversations with youngsters is even through music. It's, teachers picking certain songs to dissect with their class, right? There's songs, where it talks about there being dating violence and IPV relationships. There's a Netflix series. There was a whole Netflix series on a young couple that had taken off, and they went through, all the flags and all the things that were happening up until when the abusive partner ended up killing the girlfriend. So again, based on the school system, based on your policies and procedures, just looking at different strategies, whether it's music, poetry, Netflix series, stories to start conversations and have conversations where these youngsters can then start, thinking about and building their support toolboxes, right? Like thinking about who the important people they have in their lives are that they could go to no matter what, no judgment, right? In a time of need, crisis, when something feels off. And just kind of embedding that throughout where it's kind of a normal process for these kids to have these toolboxes. So just, wanted to touch on that. So,
Allison, I
and
just
how,
noticed that we have a couple of questions in the Q&A.
yeah.
Um, the first one is there's often a correlation between staying in an abusive relationship with poor sense of self or low self-esteem. Any advice to bridge the two concepts in helping teens? That's a really important point. And we know that these things are really like self-reinforcing. And so someone who has low self-esteem or maybe suffers from some anxiety or depression, that they become vulnerable to people to getting in these kinds of relationships, which then exacerbates their sort of conditions already. It makes it worse. So I think in terms of talking about what healthy relationships mean, how they can lift you up and make you feel good, and how relationships can sort of do the opposite. And also getting teens the mental health support that they really need. But there's so many teens out there that are suffering from mental health issues and they're just not getting connected. So making it so that they can identify, and we'll talk through some of the resources. Do they need some support outside of just what's happening in their relationship? They might need some mental health support in the first place that will help to build up things like self-esteem. Because if you're with a violent partner, that is going to trash your self-esteem. So if you're already sort of if you already are self-conscious and anxious and a little bit on the depressive side, this can make you really vulnerable to these kinds of relationships. And then those relationships will make those conditions even worse. So it's about framing it as like what trust and what equity in a relationship can do, what it can't do, and how difficult it can be how easy it can be to fall into this type of relationship, and then lose all control and be really exploited. Yeah.
Yeah.
Allison, you want to, and then the next, and I don't know if you want to add to that or if you want to take the next question is, I was not aware that you could call DCF when there are concerns where teens are involved. I can recall calling with a colleague a couple years ago, and they stated that the police needed to be contacted due to their ages because neither were 18 or older. Can you speak more to that piece?
Yeah, so mandated reporters are required to notify DCF, like if you suspect any abuse or neglect by anyone that's responsible for a child or youth's care, right? Um, if it's an incident between minors and there's no concerns about parental neglect or abuse or a parent's failure to protect the child, then the report should be made to the police. Now, I want to preface this by, if at any time, there is a concern for a child's safety, well-being, and there are concerns of abuse or neglect, calling a person can't be penalized to call the care line, to say, hey, this is what's going on, this is the information. And what happens is the care line will take the information, and if it meets the statutory guidelines as an accepted report, um, or a family assessment report, they'll do that, or they'll give guidance to do something else. So, I always say it again, it's the statement we always put out there. Like, if you do have a concern, again, that concern can be noted, with the care line. But typically, if it's between minors, and there really is no concern about, a parent's failure to protect or intervene, the police should be notified. And again, teen dating violence, it has to be taken very seriously if there are like threats to harm self or others. Um, that adolescent brain, we often have conversations where it's just the processing is so quick, and really there's not a lot of thought around even the finality of things, right? And in a lot of teen dating violence incidents where it led to severe injury or death, um, it was just so instantaneous, right? It was that immediate. And so we say we have to take it very seriously. We have to get everyone and anyone involved to help. Um, so I hope that answers the question. I think there's a question: would a student being pregnant, consenting relationship constitute a parent neglecting to protect their child? I work in a 6 to 12 grade school, and that's always a gray area with administration. I say, with questions like that, specifically go with your administration. You guys talk out what's going on, and then again, you make a decision based on the information you're gathering, whether to contact the care line or other. So how to respond to a disclosure. These are just some ways we put out. I'm glad you told me. This is important. I want you to be safe. It's not your fault. You deserve to be treated with respect. Let's make sure you get help, get the help you need right now. I'm here if you ever need help or you want to talk. And thank you for trusting me. Next slide. Um, Responding to disclosures, what we don't want to make promises that can't be kept. We don't want to become emotional or judgmental, show anger at the person, causing harm, jeopardize safety. Again, we had talked about that earlier. The more we say, oh, you can't be with that person, we don't want you with them, the more they're going to be drawn to stay with that person. What we do want to do is listen without judgment. We want to identify their feelings as normal, tell them that you believe them, safety plan, inform them of every step, help with coping skills. With responding to disclosures, we want to be present. We want to have supportive body language and proximity to the child. We want to use active listening, reflect back specific key things that they share with you. We want to say thank you, convey appreciation for the youth's willingness to disclose and trust you. Normalize their experience, convey that they're not alone, identify needs, ask if they need anything in that moment. Consult with your coworker or supervisor. It may be important that you are not the only one who has this information. And with that being said, too, is just, as the adult receiving this information, it's really important to also have support for yourself, right? Because it's not easy to hear what's going on. And it can impact the individual that's receiving the information. So we always want you to always have support as well. Next slide.
Allison, I don't know if we want to take this now, but there are some folks who have some follow-up questions about the reporting component. If the parent is aware of the abusive behavior between the teens, would that constitute a failure to protect? And also piggybacking off of that, if the school knows there's abuse happening and does not intervene, is that then neglect on the part of the school themselves? And then there's another question about a student being pregnant in a consenting relationship. The student is under 18.
Yeah, so again, all the questions around mandated reporting, right? And so again, as all educators go through mandated reporter training, you all have your administration to go to and to speak to about what's going on. If there is a concern for parental failure to protect, you can make that call to Careline. You share the information that you have, and then again, if it meets the statutory definitions for an accepted report, then that will happen, right? So we always say, again, I'm going to say, like, if there is a concern for that child or youth safety and well-being, you make that call. And then they will let you know. If you feel, I mean, if a school is not responding, I guess every school has a different chain of command. And so I would say to stay within the school administration of what the reporting is there. Like as a mandated reporter who's gone through mandated reporter training, you're aware of, the responsibility to report something. And so an individual can also call the care line around that and again make that report. Anyone in the community, anyone who ever has a concern for a child or youth's safety and well-being can call the care line without being penalized to report the concerns, to have that conversation, and then the care line receiving the information, will take that and then the decision is made based on if it meets the statutory definitions for an accepted report or something that would go to a family assessment response. I know it comes across as a very blanket statement, but you know, that's our reports to everyone is like, if you have that concern, then please, make that call.
Yeah. So just jumping in, I did put in the chat. It seems like there's a lot of questions about the nuances of reporting and when to report. So
Mhm.
I think that's something we can explore in a future student support series. We are have scheduled out for this year, but maybe that's something we can collaborate on in the fall with that team from
Mhm.
DCS. I would also just like to make one reminder in there or a consideration that at the end of the day, if you have information that you're concerned about, it's your responsibility to report that.
Mhm.
And I know it can get tricky if an administrator tries to downplay something, but um, as a mandated reporter and as a mental health professional, using your particular lens, if you are concerned, when in doubt, report.
Mhm.
You will never be at fault for reporting, but you could be held liable if you have information and then do not report. So just to put that in there.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And
I'll
mandated reporter training is always available, I don't know how often the refreshers are made available to educators, but I believe on our website, it's asynchronous on there as well, or you can reach out and somebody can come from the agency to actually do an in-person one. Um, so again, I mean, I would follow in suit with what I'm saying, with what Kate said, at any time as a mandated reporter, if you have a concern for the safety, well-being of a child or youth, you call the care line.
And I do see there's a question about some some trauma therapy. We're going to get to that towards the end of the slides. So we have some recommendations for that.
Yeah, and I did see David put they're fortunate in their town to have outposted DCF staff at the police station, and so many of the department's regions do have outposted workers in the police departments. There used to be some in youth service bureaus, but there still are many that do have an outposted worker in the PDs. All right, so we were talking about responding to disclosures, just being specific about your concerns, asking questions, to the extent possible, let them make their own decisions about their relationship. Tell the student what you're required to do under the law or school policy. Develop a plan with the student, continue to check in. Responding to a positive disclosure, you want to tell them you're concerned for their safety. You want to be supportive and understanding. You want to believe them and take them seriously. You want to help develop a safety plan. You want to remember that they are in charge. Oh, I'm just going to go back to to last part. Thanks. Just some tips for dialogue, right? We wanted to just give these tips to you guys around like encouraging open, honest, and thoughtful reflection, right? Talk openly with young teens about healthy relationships, allowing them to articulate their expectations for healthy relationships rather than dismissing ideas as wrong. Encourage debate, right? This helps young people come to his or own understanding. Be sensitive and firm. To be effective, you'll need to find the balance between being sensitive and firm, being willing to talk openly and respect differences of opinion. Understand teen development. That's really big. Adolescence is all about experimentation, from mood swings to risk taking. Normal teenage behavior can appear anything but normal. New research, however, reveals that brain development during these formative years plays a significant role in young teens' personality and actions. Knowing what's normal is critical to help you best understand and guide young people. Um, Understanding the pressure and the risks that teens are facing, like preteen and young teens face new and increasing pressures about sex, substance use, dating. Young teens often express their desire to have adults take the time to listen to them and help them think through the situations they face. Like be that person for them. Again, you're spending a lot of time, and these youngsters, they trust you guys. they want to have those people in their lives. Take a clear stand. Make sure they know how you feel about disrespect, use of abusive language, controlling behavior, or any forms of violence. Remind them that they deserve to be treated better. Open invitation to speak with you again. But remember, while we cannot force students to leave the abusive relationship, as mandated reporters, we cannot keep their disclosures secret. And so that's a really important piece in building trust and supporting a student is, just letting them know that's like a non-negotiable. So Title IX of the Civil Rights Act, students are protected from discrimination based on sex, including dating violence in any educational program receiving federal funding. School is required to investigate any complaint brought to school district personnel, and may be required to provide accommodations for impacted students, right? So it's really important to know who the Title IX coordinator is. Erin's Law requires that all public schools implement a child sexual abuse prevention program, which teaches students in grades pre-K through 12th grade age-appropriate techniques to recognize child sexual abuse and to tell a trusted adult, school personnel about child sexual abuse, parents and guardians, the warning signs of child sexual abuse, plus referrals and resources to support sexually abused children and their families. So this is also, around, Erin's Law is named after a childhood sexual assault survivor. And so, and who's now an author and an activist, who is the founder and president of Erin's Law. And so with that, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys are sexually abused by the age of 18, right? So that's why it's so important to start the education and support at such a young age, right? We want to talk to students about like safe and unsafe touches, safe and unsafe secrets, giving them examples, make students aware of safe adults they can go to if they're being abused, give examples like let them know teachers, principal, school counselor, parent, paraprofessionals, assistant educators, anyone in the school that they can go to and actually talk to. If disclosures happen, praise them for disclosing, let them know they're safe, and that you're going to continue to work with them and their team to support them, reassure them it's not their fault. Explain that the school has to notify the police, and that you must contact DCF immediately, right? So those are really, really important pieces. Changing norms, change obviously isn't easy, but change is possible and is ever needed, right? And being able to support youngsters in healthy relationships and being aware of unhealthy relationships, right? So we want to use peer leaders, holding assemblies, facilitating meetings with families, facilitating meeting with coaches, teachers, club sponsors, coordinating with the large community. I know schools and certain areas, they were implementing education within sports teams around substance misuse. And so, within that same, culture around sports and extracurricular activities, those are great areas to talk about healthy relationships. And coaches play very, very important roles, right, in a lot of these youngsters' lives. So also a really good person to talk about these things with. It's, with peer leaders, we can invite them to special sessions on preventing teenage dating abuse, give them information about the issue, what it looks like, what the effects are, why some people in such relationships may be reluctant to get help, Let students know that they're in a position to influence their peers. Many schools do have peer leaders. On the loveisrespect.org site, there's a whole section where you can have individuals set up as like ambassadors. And certain schools are starting to have these peer leaders just available throughout the day, in a very like safe and nice, meeting room environment where they're just providing, education, support, and conversations, around dating violence, um, and it's been, very successful.
I just want to jump in. We've got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. So overall approach, utilize these peer leaders to promote positive norms and advocate for healthy relationships, raise awareness with all students and staff, take steps to assess, intervene, and prevent teen dating violence. Let students know you're available to help. February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. If you haven't done anything in the school system for this year, maybe next year you look to build something out, right? And that's the stance, and that's where you start building things. So any move in the direction of support is a positive move. Susie?
All right, I'm going to go through this at rapid fire, which is the speed I enjoy anyway. So Love is Respect. I know we've talked about it a few times. This is the 24/7 resource for your teens and adolescents. There are people there. They can call, they can chat, they can text. The number one thing that the people who are responding to these texts say that the most frequent chat I get is somebody unsure about whether their relationship is unhealthy. The Healthy Relationship Toolkit is great. Love is Respect. They also have things like the relationship spectrum on their website that you can actually go through, with your students, and they'll show different scenarios, like your partner randomly stops by your job, even though you told them it makes you uncomfortable. And you can ask your students to choose whether the scenario indicates a healthy, unhealthy, or abusive relationship. So Love is Respect has tons of stuff. I strongly encourage you to go there. The Get Smart, Get Help, Get Safe curriculum is as a whole curriculum with PowerPoints and handouts and slides that you can modify for use in your classroom. Safe Dates, it has been around for years. It's great. It has both an in-class and in-school and a community component, so it's really good at sort of involving the whole community in this project. In Their Shoes is also excellent. We use the adult one in DCF, but the teen one is great. You can do this in one class period. It's super interactive. Participants become one of 6 characters based on the experiences of real teens, and it takes on things like sexting, pregnancy, homophobia, stalking, and they make choices about the relationship. It's sort of like a choose your own adventure. It's a great activity. You can do it in one class period. So there's tons of resources out there to bring this into your class. But I also want to really encourage you to reach out to the services in your area. So the sexual assault providers that are part of the Alliance to End Sexual Violence and the domestic violence services through the Connecticut Coalition, they are there to offer support for your schools. They can come in, they can provide trainings, they can do one-on-ones with your students. I'm just going to go through some of the services that they have available. So through CCADV, all their services are free and confidential. They have support groups, they have children's programs, counseling, court advocacy. They're available throughout the entire state. So no matter where you are covered by an agency. Some of these are dual agencies that also collaborate with the Alliance to End Sexual Violence. So the map is a little different, broken up, but depending on where you work and where you live, you are covered by both a sexual assault agency and a domestic violence agency. I know this is a little bit ugly, but if you just go on the Alliance to End Sexual Violence, you can kind of see which sexual violence organization is in your area. And there was a question about interventions for kids. This is where you'll find those interventions. So the mobile crisis 211, if they're having a crisis that doesn't rise to the level of emergency, but kidsmentalhealthinfo.com. So trauma-focused TFCBT, so trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy is, I think, the #1 therapy for kids that have been exposed to trauma. But what's great about kidsmentalhealthinfo.com is that you can, there's a map, and you can actually like filter the map based on the type of treatment that you're looking for and the age of the kid. Also, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network has tons of resources if you're interested in child trauma and talking about what trauma looks like and the impacts of trauma. And of course, the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Some additional resources I mentioned, NTAB already, they're amazing. Definitely go on their website. If you scroll down to the bottom, it'll say sign up for our newsletter. They're giving a free catfishing guide. Sign up for the newsletter. The newsletter is amazing. They have tons of great tips. And then if you're looking to change your policy, you can go to Break the Cycle Domestic Violence Policy. There are also these urgent care crisis centers that are facilitated through DCF. So these will provide crisis stabilization. These are for kiddos that are having a mental health crisis, but you don't want to bring them to the ER. You can bring them to these urgent crisis centers. They can do an assessment, a comprehensive mental health assessment. They can develop a safety plan, and they can connect you to additional services. I know that was rapid fire, but all these slides are also going to be available. And here is our information. Allison, you want to?
Yeah, and just as Susie said, also with the Safe Dates curriculum, if you guys look that up, like it's for children as young as 11. And again, they do everything from like a poster contest to like dating violence bingo. So really making it like easy to implement in the school system. I've been certified in it. It's a very good curriculum. Um, and In Their Shoes is phenomenal too. But you know, we can get additional information. I also want to put out there, you know, Susie and in our team, we offer twice a year. It's 8 weeks of an advanced IPV series. And we do have the End Digital Violence as one of our set days that we do. So we can send that information to Kate, you know, once we set our new dates.
And thank you so much for being here and asking really great questions and for all the hard work that you do. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for what you do for kids in Connecticut.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I put in the chat a bunch of links to the slides, the CEC request, the evaluation. I'm also, as folks are filtering out, I'm going to share my screen really quick. And it's just the list of our upcoming webinars, including the descriptions, which will be updated. Let's see. Hopefully this will work. So these are our upcoming sessions. Supporting anxious students, practical strategies for schools, beyond behavior, strategies for supporting emotional regulation in school, and youth suicide prevention, recognizing and responding to students at risk. There's one registration link for all of the webinars. So please sign up and join us at a future date.
Thank you.
Thank you.